dude, Jalen Brunson is dramatically underpaid. One of the best contracts in the NBA. Deuce McBride, the best non-rookie contract in the NBA. Julius Randle, he is underpaid relative to the value that he provides. Mitchell Robinson, he is underpaid relative to the value that he provides. Like Dante DiVincenzo, one of the most underpaid and best value contracts in the NBA. Like, these are absurd when you have this many players who are this good and not being paid as though they are that good, and they're all together. Your expectations should be enormous. Your expectation should be this team should dominate. I mean, this is the Thunder situation. They have all these players who are amazing and they're young, so they're on rookie contracts. And so you have all these extremely underpaid players. You're able to pay these other guys who are veterans, because it's like when you have a rookie quarterback who's really good, right? And he's making his rookie scale salary. It's like, okay, cool. Now I could play my corner this much money. Now I could play my edge rusher this much money. So now you have a ridiculous dominant team because of that value structure that you have. The Knicks are in that situation. So to me, I'm comparing them to what I expect them to be, which is what they should be relative to the value that they have under the salary cap. A dominant team who should be one of the top title contenders in the NBA. And all I'm saying is, in order to meet that potential, they need to be deployed in the most appropriate way to maximize it. This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host, Geoff. Geoff, it has been a minute. We've taken a few weeks off here at the end of the Knicks postseason and kind of the end of the regular season. But we're back. How have you been?
I've been good. I didn't expect a how have you been. We talk every day, so like you know how I've been. But yes, people, I'm hanging in there.
It's on behalf of the people, Geoff.
Yeah. I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing just excited to talk NBA again as always. Best sport, best league. Let's hop in,
Let's hop in. And let's talk about, let's start by talking about some big moves. And I think the only place to start that makes the most sense is to start with free agency and one of the biggest moves in free agency, which simultaneously affected two title contenders. Isaiah Hartenstein signing with OKC for 3 years, $87 million. I think $60 million of that guaranteed. Some are speculating that this won't impact the Knicks very much because Hartenstein's impact is replaceable by a healthy Mitchell Robinson and maybe a backup five. And the addition of Mikal Bridges will more than account for what the Knicks were at full strength. Some are speculating the Knicks will offset the loss by playing more 5 out with, Randle and OG being in more 4-5 lineups. Some are suggesting Hartenstein was such an important piece for the Knicks that they will be potentially the same or worse with Bridges in and Hartenstein out. And when I say some, it's probably just me.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's some?
We've talked a lot, but we haven't talked about this specifically. I think, like, where do you come down on things and both what you think they should do and what you think will actually happen given the, at least for the Knicks perspective in losing Isaiah Hartenstein and how that positions their title chances?
I think that people who think they're going to lean into 5 out regularly, haven't watched the Knicks the last 4 seasons. That's where I'll start. I'm very open to being wrong and to being surprised. I would be thrilled to be surprised and wrong, but it just is what it is at this point. I think we know what Tom Thibodeau values and what he likes and what he thinks is best. And, the one counterpoint to what I'm saying is that, well, he's never had Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby before, but he just doesn't want to do it. He believes in a true rim protector. He believes in offensive rebounding. These two things would inarguably decrease and get worse if you did not have, a true center in the lineup and you had Julius Randle effectively being the center, although, OG Anunoby is probably more the rim protector in the center at that point. I think the Hartenstein discussion is really interesting because, we spent all of our first year at Hot Hand Theory being like, one day we'll find something to disagree on. And usually when you and I disagree on things, I just ultimately see the light and realize you're right. So like that's how it's gone for 10 months. And I feel pretty strongly about this one regarding Mitch versus Hartenstein. And so I guess I didn't listen to your Locked On Knicks episode, although apparently it didn't go super well with
Universally
Knicks fans.
panned,
It
universally
was
panned
the
episode.
universally panned appearance on Lockdown Knicks, where you had the audacity to say that the Knicks might not improve that much. I think where they're going to be hurt, unless another transaction is made, is the backup center minutes. Like, I think they're going to get worse in the aggregate. And I think it's going to be hard for Mitch to replicate Hartenstein's impact last year. But my whole perspective has always been that it would have been hard for Hartenstein to replicate his impact from last year. I firmly believe, just from an absolute impact standpoint, he had an outlier level season. I think he's a very good player. I think he's a very good defender. I don't think he's the second most impactful defender in the entire NBA. I don't, from watching him. And we don't have enough data to like 100% know. This is just my feelings. He could go to OKC next year and once again put up, a +4 defensive EPM season and have all these other really strong indicators protecting the rim and, deflections and things like that. That could happen. I'm not saying it can't. But my gut feeling is that he's going to regress slightly. Again, not because he's not a really good player, but just because maintaining that level of impact is something that's really hard to do. And I think that the level he will regress to is a level that Mitch has proven he can. Mitch has a much larger sample size of proving he can match. If you look at, his 5-year impact metrics, he's pretty damn steady at a level that's very, very good. So I personally think that the gap between Mitch and Hartenstein isn't as large as you might think. I think that Mitch's level next year will probably be around what Hartenstein would have produced if he was the starting center for the Knicks. If maybe a little bit worse, but not that big. And I think the true loss is whatever the Knicks do, unless they trade for Walker Kessler, won't be what they would have gotten if they had both Hartenstein and Mitch like they did last year. I think that's where you're really losing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think, I'm happy for you to hold your ground here, but I just strongly disagree. So I think that when you say it would be hard for Hartenstein to replicate the impact that he had last year, I think what you mean by that is his defensive EPM, right? That's because so the impact that he had last year was definitely, disproportionately reflected through defensive EPM, which has a limited luck adjustment. So that may be for some of the reason why that's the case. But his metrics on all the other metrics that he was like an elite center in, I don't think that he won't be able to replicate that. I don't think he wouldn't have been able to replicate that if he was on the Knicks. I don't think we'll see his EPM be that to what it was, but he was 7th in the league in defensive LeBron. I don't see a reason why he couldn't be a top 10 defensive LeBron player again. He was 3rd in defensive box plus minus. That's really, really high. I think he could be top 10. So maybe we say it comes down a little bit, but the defensive EPM is going to come down because that is very likely the league high first in defensive EPM. Kind of like that stuff is probably a lot to do with luck. The other stuff just seems pretty solid and concrete. He was 7th in rim points saved per 75 possessions, which is, based on his defended field goal percentage at the rim. So when opponents tried to score on him at the rim, they were very unsuccessful. 10th in percentage of shots at the rim contested, which just speaks to activity, constantly flying around the court on defense. I really don't see a reason why those things should come down very much. Like, I think they could. I think that his role in OKC is probably going to be even more clear and limited, which will make his EPM, or not his EPM, his impact maybe even higher. I'm not sure, which sounds crazy, but like if he's going to be sharing the court with Chet, at some points, or really being the main center in their second unit, like you're not going to really score on Isaiah Hartenstein with your second unit players attacking the rim. And I think the biggest thing to me with the comparison between Hartenstein and Mitch is, and I texted you about this too, but I feel like this would be shocking to Knicks fans, and they probably know about it because we always see the DPM charts fly around when people feel like they prove one thing, the thing that they're trying to support.
We see those charts fly around when they reinforce intuition. That's
right.
the only time. That's the only time. We don't see them consistently, and they're
Right.
always misused. I feel like 90% of the people who use them don't know they're predictive.
Yeah,
like,
they don't. They don't
have any idea. They're like, oh, this is what it means that they did. And it's like, no, this is not telling us what they did at all. Like, it's just, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
No, I obviously agree, but that's why I think it's interesting that we haven't seen this one. But you do the comparison with Mitch and Hartenstein, and I think Knicks fans think Hartenstein just had one really good defensive season. He came out of nowhere. He was pulled off the street, like somebody found him in an alleyway and they pulled him off the street, and he was like an elite defensive center. But when you look at DPM, which, like you said, is a projection metric, and you actually look at the historical trajectory of his career, Hartenstein has actually been consistently projected to be a more impactful defensive player than Mitchell Robinson, basically throughout their careers. They both came into the league at the same time, almost the exact same age. And defensive DPM suggests that after their rookie seasons, Hartenstein was already projected to be the more impactful defensive player. And this just, to me, goes against the narrative that, he doesn't have a track record of being an excellent defensive player. And this really came out of nowhere. So yeah, but at the same time, all that is to say, not that Hartenstein is like double the defensive player that Mitch is, but I think he's better. I think it's not a negligible amount. I think that there will be a difference in terms, a realistic difference in terms of like the impact on the court between having Hartenstein versus having Mitch. But I also agree with you. The biggest difference is going to be, instead of you're going a slight downgrade, in my opinion, from Hartenstein to Mitch. And then you're going to a humongous downgrade from Mitch to whoever is going to be the backup at this point, unless the Knicks make a big acquisition and get one of these really strong defenders like a Walker Kessler. So I agree that that's the big difference. If they're not going to lean into a 5-out situation, which I think is the best way to offset this, if you were to tell me right now Tibbs is going to lean into 5-out, they're going to play Randle and OG at 4-5, like 15 minutes per game. If you were to tell me that right now, I would say the Knicks are going to be better than they would have been if they kept Isaiah Hartenstein. I just don't see that happening. I think that's going to happen like 0 minutes per game. I think it's not going to happen. So that's why, to me, it's questionable whether they've made a step up or are running in place with the acquisition of Mikal Bridges and the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein.
Well, you're also kind of burying the lead here, or not even, talking about perhaps the most important part. And it goes hand in hand with what I was just saying about, Mitch, whether I think Mitch is better or not better, or isn't, the gap between Mitch and Hartenstein isn't as wide as you do. It doesn't really matter, because whether last season from Hartenstein, it was outlier and lucky or it wasn't, Mitch has to replace that player. So like Mitch can be better than Hartenstein going forward. Like, let's just say hypothetically, Mitch has a better season the next 3 seasons than Hartenstein going forward. It's still, that doesn't change the fact that if he's not as good as Hartenstein was last season, the Knicks are getting worse at that position. And Hartenstein was excellent last season. All the metrics you pointed to. And this brings me right into my next point, which is that Mikal Bridges is better than Donte DiVincenzo, in my opinion, but he's not replacing Donte DiVincenzo in a vacuum. He's not replacing Donte DiVincenzo of 2022. He's not replacing the Bucks version or the Kings version, He's replacing 2023, 2024 Donte DiVincenzo, who likely had the best season he'll ever have in his entire life. So these are things that need to be factored in. I know it's cool to be like, oh, the Knicks went from Donte DiVincenzo and Isaiah Hartenstein to Mikal Bridges, who's like a fringe all-star player, and Mitchell Robinson, who's probably not that much worse, maybe even as good as Isaiah Hartenstein. But who these players are in a vacuum doesn't matter when trying to break down how much better or the team is going to be next season, because Mikal Bridges and Mitchell Robinson are replacing 2 players whose seasons in 2023, 2024 were excellent. I think people are forgetting how impactful Donte DiVincenzo was, how important his shooting was once he took over in the starting lineup. Mikal Bridges is a fringe all-star player, but let's not act like he's this gigantic upgrade over what the Knicks got at shooting guard last season. Mikal Bridges isn't even a shooting guard. Do I think he can play minutes at shooting guard? Yes, I do. I think he's versatile. I think he can guard up. He's an excellent point of attack defender on guards. That's huge. We saw last season what the Knicks, how they struggled against Tyrese Maxey because OG Anunoby, as great a defender he is, when you have a guard who's elite with the ball in his hands at penetrating and at pulling up, you want someone else, someone better guarding that guard so that OG Anunoby can be at his max impactful off the ball in those circumstances. I think Bridges is going to help immensely there. But in terms of evaluating how much better the team got by replacing Mikal Bridges with 2023, 2024 Donte DiVincenzo, I don't know how you feel, but I'd be pretty surprised if the upgrade is huge.
I'd be shocked. And I think it's funny because the Knicks are running into this issue where what you just said about Hartenstein and burying the lead, because you're totally right. If Hartenstein replaces and replicates what he did last year and the Knicks maintained him, then he would kind of solidify himself as an all defensive level NBA center. And so Mitch has to do that, right? To maintain what they got from the Knicks in the starting lineup from the 5 position. DiVincenzo is the same situation. 2024 Donte DiVincenzo, I think that people don't recognize how absurd the season that Donte DiVincenzo had was. Like, offensively and from a shooting standpoint, completely absurd. From a shooting standpoint, like, I did a deep dive both into Bridges, focusing on his shooting, and Donte DiVincenzo. Honestly, Bridges' shooting has kind of been all over the place throughout his career. And it makes sense because he's been in vastly different roles. And, so that we would expect to see some huge variance given the roles. But comparing his shooting to Donte DiVincenzo, like, it is not a comparison. Like, looking at the numbers deeply in terms of the 2024 season that DiVincenzo had last year, he was even better than I thought. The dude had a terrible 3-point shot quality, 16th percentile in shot quality. You would have thought he had a 95th percentile shot quality. He's getting all these open shots. That's why he was so elite. No, he had a terrible shot quality and elite 3-point shooting indicators all across the board. And it's not like Steph Curry level, who obviously routinely has the worst shot quality and also the best shooting results, which, by the way, this is tangent, but I think it's funny with Steph Curry, just looking at those numbers, because I was like, okay, wow, DiVincenzo had an insane season. Let me look at Curry's seasons. They're all better. Like every single one. Like, you can't even argue for a better shooter than Steph Curry in NBA history. Like, you can't even make a viable argument. Like, there's no argument. And he's like a minimum, like 2 tiers above the next person. And I just feel like there's no other ability we can say that about from any other player, from any other, like, he's like he's just a true one of one situation.
Are we sure that he would have been able to, like, handle the toughness of the 90s, like Reggie Miller could? Are we sure? I don't know.
Reggie Miller, he's built for that. You can tell by the arms that he's really
getting checked, running around screens and stuff. And Steph might have just quit the game.
He might have just quit. Yeah, he probably couldn't do any of the stuff we've seen from him. But anyway, so my point is just DiVincenzo's season, I don't think is replicable. Like, and I predicted he'd fall back to earth last year. And to be fair, he really didn't. He maintained what he was doing for the first half of the season after he replaced Quentin Grimes in the starting lineup. He continued to do that for the latter half of the season, which I did not see coming, because how could he? But he did. I am again going to project that there's no way he replicates it again next season, and Mikal Bridges has absolutely no chance of replicating that. And so obviously Bridges does a lot of other things. He's a much better defender on the ball, potentially an elite wing defender, point of attack defender on the ball. I'll say specifically. I don't think he's as good off the ball as a guy like OG Anunoby, which is one of the biggest gaps between them. But I just don't see.
If I can just jump in for a second, he's really good at that too. I did some film analysis. He's really good at that too. Like, I made a very, very bonkers comparison, or what should be bonkers comparison in my high hand theory thread about Mikal. And I said that in analyzing his off-ball impact, he's like a hybrid of DiVincenzo and Quickly, which is like crazy because like in their retrospects, they're two of the best at what they're really good at. Like Quickly in terms of like playing free safety, stunting, recovering. There are plays you watch from Bridges where like he's even taller than Quickly. So like when he does these stunts and like helps on a drive, he's capable of protecting the rim even better than Quickly is. It's wild. Like he'll get like blocks at the rim and stuff, whereas Quickly just uses his immense length to like go vertical and disrupt shots. Bridges is like rejecting them at the rim. And then he's also like fucking hunting steals off the ball, and he's really, really good. He's really good off the ball, man. Like really, really good. I agree, not OG Anunoby levels, but that just speaks more to Anunoby being one of, you know, like one of the best, you know, with Derek White.
So I think this is really interesting because at least like the data from B-Ball Index, which kind of breaks down some of these differences defensively, and obviously it's not ideal. It's really hard to come up with some of these defensive metrics, and they're not likely to be the most reliable. The data does not paint him as a good off-ball defender. Like it paints him as like okay to like not good.
Even back in Phoenix, because remember I did the breakdown of his time in Phoenix.
Yeah, he was better in Phoenix, but still that was not like a strength from him. So it was basically, it painted him as like one of the top point of attack defenders, wing defenders, but off ball he was like good enough kind of thing. So that's really interesting. Whereas with OG Anunoby, he's just off the charts across the board. Like he's just like one of the best at everything that has to do with defense, essentially. So that's why, to me, they're just like not in the same tier of defender. And if I had to choose, I would put Bridges on the ball with a, you know, at the point of attack or even on the best wing, and have OG be able to roam. And a big difference too between them is not just like, you know, the ability to stunt and recover, the ability to protect the rim. It's also to generate steals from those positions where you're helping, where you're digging, where you're filling passing lanes. Bridges has never been like a really high steal guy aside from his first 2 seasons in the NBA. But obviously OG as we all know, OG Anunoby will get into passing lanes, will get tons of steals and create transition opportunities, live ball turnovers, and completely disrupt your entire offense. So to me, they're not like comparable defensive players. I know, like, you know, I think the moniker is Wingstop between, you know, Bridges and OG, and I think Bridges is really, really good. I just don't think he's like, they're just not comparable. I don't think they're similar. I don't think they're on the same tier. I don't think they're probably I would say like 2 tiers away as Bridges from OG Anunoby defensively. It's
like calling Clay and Steph the Splash Bros.
It is. That's a good comp. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I could see Bridges being Clay-like in terms of being like, you know, maybe a little bit overrated and being associated with someone, and then OG's just the best, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I would say it's like that. So, but to be fair, like, I guess I think, and now hot hand theory is going to get panned. This episode is going to get panned as well. Like, I think Bridges is really good. I think where Bridges' value comes from is in his versatility. That is his value to me. You got to play Bridges 2 through 4. The fact that he can, in some lineups, he's going to be your primary creator. In some lineups, he's going to be your secondary. In some lineups, he's going to be your spacer and defender. Like, you have to be able to move him around and use him like a chess piece and use his skills in this very flexible way. And that's how you get the most out of him. It's the fact that he's always going to elevate your lineup. Like he like creates this floor for your lineup, no matter what situation you put him out in. And you have to take advantage of that to get the most out of him. And so to me, the Bridges acquisition comes down to deployment. Like, you can deploy Bridges in such a way that it makes the Knicks better than they would have been if they just retained Isaiah Hartenstein. I believe that. I don't think that's going to happen. And that's my hesitation about the deal, about giving up 5 first-round picks and a swap. Like, my issue with it is that I don't think that we are appropriately equipped to deploy him in the way that would maximize his impact, such that value exchange is appropriate. I guess that's where I'm at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I share that hesitation regarding Bridges. I mean, I can see a world where he plays a large percentage of his minutes at shooting guard, and that's not how he should be deployed at
Right.
all. I think that there are all sorts of lineup constructions where you have Bridges playing. Let's forget him playing power forward. That's never going to happen. Like that's not going to happen. OG Anunoby and Julius Randle, save injury, OG Anunoby and Julius Randle will play all the power forward minutes. Fucking Precious, if he comes back, will play power forward before Mikal Bridges does. As terrible as that is,
Josh Hart will play power forward before
Josh Hart will play like if they went small and had a lineup that was like center, Hart, and dude, center plus the Nova core or whatever, like Josh Hart would be deployed as the power forward, which would be fine.
Yeah,
like that's fine. That is literally semantics at that point, like that's even if Hart is being used as the power forward, but that lineup won't even see that much time, I'd imagine. He's just not going to sit OG Anunoby and Julius Randle at the same time.
They might do it for vibes. The Nova boys out there.
The Nova vibes. Yeah, you might even go really small if the Knicks sign Kyle Lowry, and just go with all five Nova guys. That'd be fun. But yeah, I can see a world where Bridges plays a huge percentage of his minutes at shooting guard, and lineups like Brunson, DiVincenzo, Bridges, Anunoby, center aren't used as much. But those are lineups that are integral to the team's ceiling. They need to be seen. And yeah, I don't really have a much more optimistic outlook because I think we kind of feel the same about the coach, which is that he's a good coach, but he is limiting because of his worldview about what the best way to win in basketball is. So like he thinks there's one way, and that's a good thing. That's a good that's a good way to raise a floor. That's how you see consistently good teams under him. But you and our basketball philosophy is built around attacking a ceiling and trying to hit your ceiling. And your point is that if you're going to give up 5 first-round picks for a player, the goal should be to maximize him. That should be the goal in acquiring a player that you're willing to give up so much draft capital for. And I mean, not that these are related. I don't think that the Knicks lost Isaiah Hartenstein because they traded for Mikal Bridges. I think that they were probably going to lose him regardless. But if you're going to lose a player of Isaiah Hartenstein's caliber, it's even more essential that you raise the ceiling through other avenues. You can't just be like, oh, well, we'll just replace Hartenstein in the aggregate and play the exact same way. Like, no, that's not. It's really hard to win a championship that way. The Knicks' best path to winning a championship, and make no mistake, XJ just said it, we both believe this is a championship caliber roster today. Like, this is a championship caliber roster. The questions aren't, are the players good enough? Is the team constructed good enough? The questions are the Knicks going to do everything they can to maximize this roster? And I think XJ, his hesitation is because no, he doesn't think so. And I share his skepticism, unfortunately.
I think maybe why I guess Knicks fans may feel like, what is this guy talking about? It's because maybe I'm doing a bad job. I keep burying the lead potentially. Like, I agree with you. I think this Knicks team has a championship title contending roster, like for sure. I think they should be a top 5 team easily in the NBA and could push for a top 3 team pretty easily if things go well, like given health, like relatively good health. They don't lose one of their key players for a significant amount of time. I think, OKC is alone at the top, and then you have Boston, and then you have New York.
Whoa. You think OKC has just leaped Boston?
Yeah.
Okay, fun.
I mean, we could talk about that too. I mean, it has to do, like, obviously, I think that OKC, and we're talking about the Knicks, obviously, like with the performances that we've seen from players, and like, are they going to be able to replicate that, and are they going to be able to hit those heights again? The Knicks, I think, what I'll say about the Knicks is that everybody's looking at the January run for the Knicks, the 14-2, the OG Anunoby lineups being all absurd in terms of like how they performed. And to me, I looked really closely at that stretch just to kind of get a sense of what was like actually happening and if that's sustainable. And typically what I do when I want to understand like sustainability is I go straight to opponent shooting, because that's the biggest indicator to me. It's very subject to luck, and so I look at opponents shooting. And for that stretch, opponents shot 36% on wide open threes against the Knicks on 17 attempts per game, which was the fourth worst in the league during that stretch. And obviously, for most people, it's intuitive that teams don't force misses on wide open shots. So more or less, that's pure luck. They shot 36% on wide open threes. The Knicks did nothing to stop them from making those threes. They just had bad luck shooting during that time period. For the most part, maybe there's some things you can do within the margins. Have bad shooters be the ones getting open shots, et cetera, et cetera. We've talked about this with with the Pelicans defense, from the 3-point defense, where they got a lot of shooting luck in back-to-back years on wide open threes. But there's limited things you can do. Even worse than that, during that stretch on open threes, which is shots with the closest defender between 4 and 6 feet, on 13 attempts per game, Knicks opponents shot 28.2%, by far the worst in the league during that stretch. No other team was within 3 percentage points of that 28.2% stretch. So they got amazing shooting, really, 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 really bad shooting performances from their opponents with limited influence by the Knicks defense, insofar as we can tell. So that to me is like an indicator of, okay, yes, OG is a monster and creates complete havoc. And having OG and Hartenstein out there together is just completely ridiculous. OG shooting was great. Randle was playing extremely well. Brunson playing extremely well. DiVincenzo shooting completely through the roof. I don't see that as being able to happen again. Maybe for a stretch, yes. But like for the season, they wouldn't be like that even if they brought back Isaiah Hartenstein. So to me, that ceiling is already not what they're going to be. Now, again, we talked about how the performances from some of these players are difficult to replicate, namely Hartenstein, where you have Mitchell Robinson trying to produce at that level, and Dante DiVincenzo, where you have DiVincenzo trying to produce at that level in probably like 15 to 18 minutes per game, and Mikal Bridges trying to replicate the impact more so on the defensive end, more so in a holistic way, both offensively and defensively, as opposed to like strictly through his shooting and spacing. I think those things would be hard to replicate. When I look at the Thunder team, I think that we have one thing that's going to be really difficult to replicate, and that's Jalen Williams, J-Dub's ridiculous shooting. J-Dub was absurd shooting, off the dribble, pull-ups. I mean, off the dribble and pull-ups, same thing. Catch and shoots, 50% from the mid-range, 43% from three, completely absurd shooting. He never shot like that in his entire life. His free throw shooting didn't go up. So to me, there's no indication that he has become one of the premier shooters in the league and of the last like several years. Like, I don't see an indicator to believe that that's real and that's going to last. Other than J-Dub's performance, everything else seems sustainable to me. Everything else seems sustainable from SGA. In fact, I would posit that SGA could be even better with more spacing consistently in the lineup with the absence of Josh Giddey. Isaiah Joe potentially being better. He's only 25 years old. Chet Holmgren probably being better, only 22 years old, and actually only had one playing season in the NBA. It's basically his rookie season. And then you're adding a guy like Alex Caruso, a great shooter and defender, which takes some stress off of J-Dub and SGA defensively. Adding Hartenstein, so you have consistently excellent rim protection for 48 minutes per game. I think there's no way they're worse. And they were already the 1 seed in the West. I think they're clearly the best team in the NBA. That's what I think.
Can you imagine having one of the greatest players of all time on your team and then having a perfect supporting piece in Alex Caruso and then just actively giving him away? That's got to be, I mean,
you love talking about this.
Dude, every single time I think about Caruso, I just think about how the Lakers could just like have him. I just don't understand. Like, if I was a Lakers fan, I would think about that every day. They could just have him and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Caldwell-Pope wouldn't be a Magic. They could just, and they were like, no, we want Russell Westbrook. I just don't get it.
Think about this, Geoff. If you could just say, hey, let's take prime KCP and prime Caruso and have the two of them and put them on any contending team, they would immediately be like the title favorite.
Yeah, any team.
And they were already on the team.
And they were already on a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis. That's so unbelievable to me. I can't believe Lakers. I would talk about it every day. I would be like, all the hate you got for that Locked On Knicks episode, I would get every day. Because they would just be like, trying to talk about Austin Reeves. And I'd be like, yeah, but we could just have Caruso. So, like, fuck, man. That's so brutal for that team. I mean, the Lakers have had enough good things happen to them, and they've had enough good players to root for. I think I agree with you. Yeah, I think my initial reaction was just like bias. The Celtics just had one of the great seasons we've seen in recent memory. They're a pretty perfectly constructed team. They didn't really have to go through the gauntlet at all, through the playoffs, and at all. Like they didn't really have to face anyone. They got the easiest, best finals matchup ever. Perfect for them. Like they weren't even tested. It was just, they got to just play their base scheme on both sides of the ball and didn't really have to even change anything. Even with their easy path through the East, with Halliburton getting hurt and Brunson getting hurt and Embiid getting hurt and Giannis getting hurt and Butler getting hurt, all these injuries through the East, even if that was their path, if they just had to face Minnesota or Denver or OKC, I would be like, okay, that cements it. But Boston, they were just basically gifted a championship, honestly. But it sucks because they were so dominant in a way that it feels like they deserve better. Like they deserve to not have this. It's obviously not an asterisk championship. I don't take those seriously. I think if you win the championship, you win the championship. But I do have sympathy for people who are like, well, man, they didn't play anybody. And so I just have this bias in my mind where I was like, I'm always trying to remind people like, hey, this is a really, really good team. And it's hard for me to just supplant them have somebody just take over at the top. But I agree with you. OKC is going to be really good. And I, of course, agree with you about the Jalen Williams shooting thing. I'm a little bit more skeptical about SGA than you are in terms of like sustaining that level of impact. I think I definitely agree with you that the spacing is going to get better and his offense could even take a step forward. There's some weird defense stuff that's just hard to do. I don't know. Maybe he is just that good, but it's hard to be an MVP level offensive player and just be elite defensively year after year. Do you disagree with that?
No. I agree with that. So I don't think he's going to replicate his, like, again, this is like the Hartenstein situation. I don't think he's going to have the same defensive EPM that he had. He had a 2.6 defensive EPM. Like, I think that's very low probability, but I do think he's going to be, we had this conversation right before the pod. I do think he's going to be better than he was, right? Like he's going to be 26. I think he's going to be, in the next 3 to 4 years, are going to be probably the elite prime of his career, especially athletically in terms of his experience. He's had 5 years in the league now. His shooting has increased slowly. His free throw percentage has sustained. He's become one of the elite free throw shooters in the game. I think he has room to grow in terms of his 3-point shooting percentage. His finishing has improved. Everything it's just everything he does feels so sustainable, and it feels like he has room to me offensively. Defensively, I think he's going to continue to get steals, and that's where a ton of his impact comes from. When you get a lot of steals, you're going to have a high defensive impact because steals are one of the biggest ways you can impact defensively. You stop the opponent's possession, and if they're live ball steals, you create a new possession for your team in an advantageous position. Like, that's an amazing thing that you can do. And with a borderline 3% steal percentage like SGA had last year, you're going to have a crazy impact. I think he could potentially have a lot of steals still, because imagine lineups where Caruso and Dort are on the court with him at the same time. Like, who is he going to guard? The third best offensive creator, and he can cheat off of that guy and create havoc through the passing lanes. He's amazing at anticipating passes and being in the right place at the right time, digging down. He can get steals off of guys in the post. He can get steals off of passes. He has crazy long arms, great reflexes. Like, I don't think he'll have a plus 2.6 defensive EPM because that's ridiculous, but I think he's going to have a really strong defensive EPM on top of potentially being a better offensive player. Like, have we
ever seen a team like this? Like, I know Chet and Jalen Williams aren't, like, they could be all-star level players. You'd agree with that, right? Like, they 100%. Yeah. So we have an MVP candidate, 2 fringe all-star level players, maybe as soon as next season. And then you and I counted it recently. They have like 8 role players who can just play. And I'm not
It's
even
crazy.
It's disrespectful to toss Hartenstein in there with them, but like I don't think Hartenstein is on the level of Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren. I could be wrong about that.
No. That's fair. I think that's fair. Yeah.
But you got Hartenstein, you got Dort, you got Isaiah Joe, you got Caruso, you have Aaron Wiggins, you've got Kenrich Williams. Like they just they've got Case and Wallace. That's 10 right there. They go 10 deep of guys you can put out there as supporting pieces, and they will confer positive impact playing next to these 3 guys. I've never seen a team like this ever. They're gonna win elite. They're gonna win 60 games. Like I don't see how they save like gruesome injuries to multiple stars or just crazy bad luck.
Why do they have to be gruesome?
Yeah.
The gruesome, like just blood pouring out from like, just I'm
thinking of the Gordon Hayward injury against the Cavs where Jay Crowder's like holding his head, you know. Nah, wouldn't wish that on anybody. No. We haven't even mentioned Gordon Hayward, another great piece for OKC. you loved that acquisition.
Oh my God, how much did I hate that acquisition at the time? What did they do? Like that's the worst Presti move of the last. Because
you felt the way other people felt. They needed to get a true center. You know, like they should.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, this OKC team is going to be really good. To sort of rewind and put a bow on the Knicks conversation, I think one thing your analysis is missing, and maybe you're being a little bit short-sighted here, or not short-sighted in terms of you're wrong, but in terms of how this could play out. I feel like the Knicks are going to be better next season because they just have Julius Randle back. That's one thing that it doesn't really get mentioned in these conversations. They won, 50 some odd games last season, and Julius Randle missed basically the entire second half. So even if all the things that you're talking about play out, even if Donte DiVincenzo and Deuce McBride don't play enough, even if the backup center is a big downgrade from what Mitchell Robinson was, even if Mitchell Robinson is a more meaningful downgrade from Isaiah Hartenstein than the average Knicks fan thinks, even if Mikal Bridges doesn't end up being a meaningful upgrade over Donte DiVincenzo, you put all those things in one bag, you just get 35 minutes of all NBA impact back at power forward. Whatever we think of Julius Randle and the fit, like they're just going to win 55 games next season. And like, you're going to get a bunch of angry Knicks fans who aren't willing to look into the nuance, who aren't willing to be like, oh, well, technically you were right. Technically what Mitch was worse than Hartenstein. They're just gonna be like, fuck you, you idiot. The Knicks were better. You're wrong.
You know what? I deserve the panning. I think I deserve it, actually. I'm going to give it to myself now. I'm going to leave a comment on this video criticizing myself is what I'm going to do, because I've not been clear about this at all. They'll be better than they were last year, like in the aggregate, in terms of their record. They better win more than 50 games this coming season. I wholeheartedly expect, if I was to bet, I would clearly bet that they'll win more games than they won last year. They'll be better. What I mean by the comparison is what the Knicks would have been with Isaiah Hartenstein versus what they will be with losing Isaiah Hartenstein and bringing in Mikal Bridges. They only had a fully healthy roster with Isaiah Hartenstein in it for the month of January. That's what I'm comparing it to. And what I'm saying is, of course, that month was unrealistic, in my opinion, based on the shooting that I just shared. But at the same time, I think they are still a dominant team. They were still a dominant team despite that. So I'm comparing it to that like run of time where they had OG. So if people come at me and say, what are you talking about? Look, they won 53 games and they won 50 last year. It's like, yeah, they better. Like, what the heck? Like, how would they not? If they have health and they have OG Anunoby for a whole season, I don't even care if they don't have Julius Randle for the whole season. I would still say they'll be better and have a better record than they had last year. That's not my point, but it's my fault because I'm not framing it correctly. My point is, with OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein in the lineup together, I think that gives them an elite defense, right? That's an elite defense in a box. The way that Victor Wembanyama is like your defense in a box, OG and Hartenstein together is an elite defense. That's it. I don't care who's surrounding them. And then with the other pieces that they have, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, OG Anunoby shooting, Dante DiVincenzo shooting. It's an elite offense. So now you have an elite defense and elite offense. I think they're taking a little bit of a step back defensively and probably a little bit of a step back offensively, unless they deploy Mikal Bridges in some of these ways. I'm comparing it to that rotation, to that lineup, not on the aggregate where they barely had Julius Randle, where they barely had OG Anunoby, like that, where they didn't have Mitchell Robinson. Like that's not the comparison that I'm making, which I haven't made clear, so that's my fault.
Yeah, we've talked about this long enough, and we'll keep talking about it on future episodes. I guess I'm still just surprised that you don't see a world where OG and Mitch can at least approach or approximate what OG and Hartenstein did, because I see them being completely dominant defensively together, just in the sense of, I think Mitch's job gets easier, especially with the addition of Bridges. Like, I think part of what Hartenstein does really well is timing, decision-making. These are things that these are edges that maybe he has on Mitch that won't be as prevalent on the team next season. And I think simplifying Mitch's job is going to amplify and increase his impact. I think I might go so far as to say, I think we might see the best defensive season of Mitchell Robinson's career next season, based on the surrounding parts and what he in the role he's going to be asked to play in New York.
I think that's totally within the realm of reasonable potential outcomes. So I won't say that. I think what's not in the realm of reasonable potential outcomes is for, the Knicks to perform the way that they did when OG and Hartenstein were on the court together last year. That's just not going to happen. And a lot of that, like I just made the argument that a lot of that is luck based to some extent, but that just won't happen because it's just like not realistic for that to happen. So yeah, I think that they can be really great defensively. I think they can be dominant defensively. They're not going to be what OG and Hartenstein was, because they just won't be. Like, so that's the argument that I'm making.
Didn't you? The defensive rating when the two of them shared the court was like close to 100, right, or something preposterous.
Yeah,
like
it was 100. Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen. And I think the best argument is your argument, which is that it wouldn't have happened even if they brought Hartenstein back, right? Like, to me, that's the strongest argument. Not that Mitch and OG can do the same thing. They can't. They won't.
Right. And I think that's like the most interesting part of the conversation. And if Hartenstein wasn't going to do it anyways, if Hartenstein next season and Mitch are more negligible, then what do you do? First of all, the Knicks did everything they could to re-sign Hartenstein. So like,
I'm not blaming the Knicks.
No, I know you're not. I'm just saying, I want to make sure that people know that we know that the Knicks didn't make like an active decision. Like, oh no, we're just better off without him. They tried, they understood his value. They just, they couldn't bring him back. But insofar as the conversation you're trying to have, which outcome is better, Mitch and Bridges versus Hartenstein and DiVincenzo? It's tough because, I think the answer is last year's version of Hartenstein and Dante is the answer. But how do we know that last year's version of Dante and Hartenstein were going to be replicated by those players next year? And if they're not going to be replicated, wouldn't you just rather have the better basketball player? And I feel like Mikal Bridges could very well be the best basketball player of the four players and the most important basketball player when it comes to winning at the highest level, which we haven't even mentioned here. We haven't even talked about that aspect of it. Look, I'm not a big like, oh, you got to do it in the playoffs guy. Like we spend our lives, we've spent our friendship defending guys. We defended Jokic, and then Jokic won MVP. And people are like, oh, well, I guess Jokic should have won MVP. And now it's a joke that Embiid's getting MVP. And we're like, no, Embiid is the MVP this season. What are we talking about? And so I'm not a big believer in the whole like doing it in the playoffs. I do think, however, some skill sets correlate more in the playoffs. I think you agree with that there are certain, when teams are more locked in and opposing teams are, their preparation and their scouting reports are more advanced, and they're playing their better players more, I think certain skill sets correlate with impact at a higher degree in the playoffs. And I think the type of player Mikal Bridges is a wing who can give you impact without the ball in his hands, who can also guard the opposing team's best guards, sometimes their best wings. I think that type of player, even if he is unlikely to confer the same impact that Dante or Hartenstein did in next regular season, I think he might be the most valuable player to the Knicks' chances of winning a championship.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair argument, and it may be the case. And so, I'm not really puffing out my chest like I'm really, really confident about this. I know this to be the case. Everybody's wrong. I'm saying what I think is most probable, right? So I'm making the argument for what I think is most probable. And
also the people should know XJ. XJ is a little bit, he gives off this robotic vibe, oh, I'm just like a nerd who just like thinks about things so objectively. He's a bit behind the scenes, a bit of like a pessimist when it comes to the Knicks. He's very much like, don't get my hopes up, guys. I don't want to be broken again. So some of it could be coming from this perspective.
Yeah, it's like it's the old emotional hedge, It's like, well, I'm not going to get my hopes up. But to be honest, like, that is totally within the realm of possible outcomes, and it's not unrealistic by any stretch of the imagination. Again, like I said earlier on, I can imagine this Knicks team being better than they would have been and being a dominant team, being the third best team in the NBA and having definitely a real shot at the finals, like a very high potential to get to the finals and a real shot at the championship. So, again, like if I was to say, I think that my projection is correct, I would say probably I'm going to say I think there's a 52% chance it happens, but that's the one I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the thing that I think is most likely to happen, not the thing that I think is less likely to happen because it paints a more optimistic picture,
Do you notice that this is the second straight season we're kind of going through this? Like, we do this thing where all Knicks fans hold the Knicks to a really high standard before the season happens. And we're like at the high end of that. We're like, before last season, we were like, they could win 55 games. They're going to be a really good team. They have 2 All-NBA players, and then they go 9 deep with really good players.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was some injury luck or lack of luck, to be more clear.
Mm-hmm.
But, at the end of the season, it's like, oh, well, this was just like a gritty, try-hard team anyways. Like, the expectations weren't that high. And I just feel like every year Knicks fans forget what their own expectations for the team were. And I hope they just win. I mean, as a Knicks fan, I hope they just win a championship next year. But I can't, for my mental health, I can't do another season of getting to the end and being like, oh, just appreciate these guys. This second round berth was just totally worth it, and it's like, fuck, man.
Dude, please, I think that this is the issue. Is like, I think and maybe you're doing this too, I won't speak for you, but like I'm holding them to this standard that I think is related to the level of talent that they have on the team. Like, everybody on the team is underpaid. Every single player on the Knicks team, well, maybe one is not, but he's probably appropriately paid. And every other single player on the team is underpaid. I knew you would get that in a second.
We haven't even said his name. Whatever. Go on.
It's not, but like, dude, Jalen Brunson is dramatically underpaid. One of the best contracts in the NBA. Deuce McBride, the best non-rookie contract in the NBA. Julius Randle, he is underpaid relative to the value that he provides. Mitchell Robinson, he is underpaid relative to the value that he provides. Like, Dante DiVincenzo, one of the most underpaid and best value contracts in the NBA. Like, these are absurd when you have this many players who are this good and not being paid as though they are that good, and they're all together. Your expectations should be enormous. Your expectation should be this team should dominate. I mean, this is the Thunder situation. They have all these players who are amazing and they're young, so they're on rookie contracts. And so you have all these extremely underpaid players. You're able to pay these other guys who are veterans. because it's like when you have a rookie quarterback who's really good, right? And he's making his rookie scale salary. It's like, okay, cool. Now I could play my corner this much money. Now I could play my edge rusher this much money. So now you have a ridiculous dominant team because of that value structure that you have. The Knicks are in that situation. So to me, I'm comparing them to what I expect them to be, which is what they should be relative to the value that they have under the salary cap. A dominant team who should be one of the top title contenders in the NBA. And all I'm saying is, in order to meet that potential, they need to be deployed in the most appropriate way to maximize it. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen.
Yeah, the Bridges thing, it really feels like a fork in the road or whatever, a huge tipping point for them. You know, how Bridges is used could ultimately decide how high the ceiling is. Because if he's only playing shooting guard, first of all, that reduces Dante's minutes. Like all of a sudden, you referenced it earlier. Like, are we really going to see a Dante DiVincenzo go from the season he just had to playing 8 to what Grimes and Quickly were last season? To just, oh, sorry, we got a better player, and Tom Thibodeau can't imagine another role for you besides shooting guard. So you're just spelling Mikal Bridges now. It's like, no, dude. Like these guys, they can guard multiple positions. They can play with, you know, Bridges can play with both DiVincenzo and Brunson. Bridges can play with Deuce and Brunson. You know, these are things that can happen. And I loved your analogy to a football team with a quarterback on a rookie contract. I think that's a perfect analogy for a number of reasons, but the number one reason I think it's a perfect analogy is because it highlights that this isn't going to last forever. The Knicks don't have this luxury. This is why XJ is so feels so strongly about this, because we've talked about this for High Hand Theory's entire existence. This window actually isn't as big as Knicks fans think it is. They look at the ages. Fans look at the ages of the guys on the roster and they think, holy shit, like players play until they're in their mid-30s now. Like we're just going to have this team for no. Contract situations don't work like that. They're going to have to pay Brunson soon. They're going to have to, if they want to keep Julius Randle around, they're going to have to pay him soon. The Mitchell Robinson contract, that's a luxury right now. He's going to be up for another contract. Maybe they won't keep him. Then what do they do at center? All these guys, Deuce McBride, he's already in the, all these luxuries that they have right now, they're not just going to have them forever. And it's really, really hard to just keep having them. So you have to win now. You have to win when you have all these guys who are on such plus EV contracts, whose value is just so high relative to what they're being paid. And that's why the idea that like, oh, we can just maximize them later. No, you have to do the best you can with what you have now. This is a team that can win a championship. The expectation from fans should be that when you trade for Mikal Bridges, you're trading for him to get the most out of him. And I think that's where you're coming from mostly.
Yeah, I think that was perfectly summarized. I don't have to add anything to that. Hopefully I stumbled my way through being able to express my perspective in every aspect of this perspective, but I was going to make a bad joke, but yeah, I hopefully, people are able to understand that, and as well as yours, which I think is like, I'll say this. You said that we often disagree, and at the end you'll be like, I'll convert you to my side. You're probably closer to right on this than I am. Probably. So, and I hope you are. We'll see. We'll see how things go. But any last things you want to say about the Knicks situation?
No, I think that's it. I guess I just want to throw it back to you. When you say I'm closer to right, you mean specifically about Mitch versus Hartenstein? I think I share your concerns in terms of how Mikal will be used.
Yeah. About basically, well, I think like you think that the Knicks will be better than I think they'll be this year. Is that right?
Yeah, I think they'll be really good.
I think they'll be really good too. I'm saying, like I said, I think they'll probably win 53, 54 games. But you think they'll be better than that?
No, that seems like a fair range. Maybe I'd have them like 55 to 57, but nothing meaningful.
And where do you put them in the hierarchy of like title chances across the league?
I think that they are the fourth title favorite. I would have them as the fourth best team, third or fourth in like a tier
between Philly.
With Philly, yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're pretty much in the
But
same place then.
it depends how Philly rounds out their roster. I don't think, and we'll talk about this on part 2. There are a lot of people being super dismissive of like how good Paul George is, and
yeah, it's
he's
crazy.
really good.
It's
I'm already
it's
I'm
crazy.
already seeing like Mikal Bridges versus Paul George comparisons, and that's insane to me. It's just I don't understand. I sent this to XJ the other day. So for anybody listening, anybody who has an open mind and isn't just trying to like, oh, like he's a Knick, so he's better. Paul George's worst season since his rookie season would be better than Mikal Bridges' best season per EPM.
By EPM, right? Yeah.
Yeah, per EPM. That's how good Paul George is. That's not Mikal Bridges slander. It's not slander to say you're not as good as Paul George. It's okay. Like, I don't get it. People were mad when I said that about Julius Randle last year too. It's like, do people not realize that Paul George is like if you can't be a star, if you're not a top 5 player, Paul George is like the perfect player. He's like the guy you want on your team. If you have Paul George on your team, he can be the best player on your team. You probably won't be a title contender, but like he's capable of doing that. He has the game, but he can just easily slide to being the second best player and maintain his impact. And please, if you take one thing away from this podcast, please recognize how valuable that is. Like people are talking about Lauri Markkanen. People don't, I don't understand why people are so high on Lauri Markkanen. The whole appeal of Lauri Markkanen is he can shoot, he can put the ball in the basket really well, and he can do other things, but his impact remains the same regardless of who he shares the court with. That is a super unique thing across the league. Look at what happened to DeJounte Murray. DeJounte Murray goes from a Spur to a Hawk. His paradigm changes completely. His impact changes completely because of the paradigm that he's in. I'm not hating on DeJounte Murray. You can build it. Let's see what the Pelicans can do. You can build a team with DeJounte Murray on your team where it's really good. That's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more difficult. When you have Lauri Markkanen or Paul George or one of these guys on your team, your avenues are endless. You can do anything around these guys because these guys will be good no matter who is on the court with them.
I mean, that was brilliantly said. And I think that for me, it's like, I just realized this for some reason, like Lauri Markkanen is like my Kevin Youkilis of, what's his name? What's the actor's name? I forget his name. In Moneyball.
The actor who plays Kevin Youkilis?
No. In Moneyball, dude, what's that guy's
Brad
name?
Pitt, Chris Pratt,
the other guy,
Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill. There you go. You know how in the scene when Jonah Hill is like breaking down the tape of Kevin Youkilis and they're like, oh, this guy's like, that's who Lauri Markkanen is to me. It's like the GOAT of just being off the ball and making an insane impact. Like nobody has off ball impact like Lauri Markkanen in the NBA. And the fact is that Paul George,
Steph,
right there you go. Yeah, Steph. The fact is that Steph we just talked about Steph is like a unique player in the history of the league. The fact is that Paul George is not on the level of Lauri Markkanen, but he's not extremely far off. And he can do a bunch of stuff on the ball too. Like that is crazy. That is crazy. I get he's 34. I know that he's 34. He's 34. Yes. He just had one of his best seasons of his entire career. I do think you have a 2-year window with Paul George. I think 2 years is enough to get the job done. One of the 2 years with that kind of squad. So we'll see. I think we're pretty close on the ranking here.
And if Paul George falls off, that's fine. I can see that in an outcome. 35 is still 35. That's fine. But let's not like retroactively pretend Paul George hasn't been good the last 10, 12 seasons. Let's not do that. If he fails in Philly because he got older and he fell off a cliff, you're muted, by the way. But that's a valid concern.
Yeah. No, I was just saying talking about his past. That's just objectively not the case. He's been in the league,
right? And that's the main pushback, and just the player profiles. I want people who are listening to. You don't have to agree with me, but to at least understand my perspective about the value of this type of player profile. And if your main concern is Paul George's age, not only will I not try to convince you you're wrong, I can't convince you you're wrong because I think that's a valid concern. If your concern about Paul George is you don't think in the past few years he's been as good as Mikal Bridges, and you think Mikal Bridges is a better basketball player, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You're just objectively wrong about that. And I need to point that out because, yeah, we're Knicks fans, but we're trying to also tell the truth here and talk about basketball. So, yeah, I'm going to say that.
Yep. All right, Geoff, you took an unbeatable position. I hope you're happy. You took the position of is the sky blue? These people are trying to tell me the sky's purple. Well, I'm right. Like, yeah, you're right, Geoff. All right, you're right. I think that's all that we got, unless there's anything else you want to say. I think this is a good conversation. Hopefully we really kind of fleshed out our positions here on what the Knicks have done, on what they did. We'll see what they do coming up. They probably still have a move, I was going to say, or two, but probably just a move left to kind of solidify their roster. And we'll be here to break it down, and we'll be here throughout the offseason as well. So glad to be back. And for Geoff, this has been Hot Hand Theory.